Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Front Page on the AIM Network, India's definitive media organization and voice on everything AI and technology. Hope you're doing wonderfully well. You know, at first glance, when we all look, they all look disconnected. I'm talking, of course, about new tools, new deals, new trade terms. But when we put them all together, they're all pointing to a singular shift, which is that power is moving closer to the infrastructure and control is concentrating wherever the real systems now breathe. And to elaborate on that, here are the headlines for tonight. OpenAI unveils a Mac-first command center for coding agents and retires legacy models, signaling a definitive pivot from chat interfaces to a new era of supervised parallel developer workflows. Snowflake's $200 million deal embeds OpenAI models directly where data lives and breathes, killing integration friction for 12,600 customers. This shifts the battleground from consumer UIs to secure, governed, database-level intelligence. India secures massive relief as Washington slashes tariffs to 18% following the Modi-Trump call. The catch, though, a strategic pivot from Russian oil and $500 billion in promised US purchases. Finally, India's manufacturing GCCs are shifting from cost centers to core innovation hubs, driven by engineering research and development, AI, digital twins, and IP ownership, signaling structurally driven post-2020 growth, which is documented on the AIM research report. Hello and welcome to Front Page. You know, only a few days ago on Front Page, we said that something had altered, though it was difficult to say at the time what exactly it was. And of course, Microsoft had given a name to it, the agent runtime. And GitHub, which had once been a place for storing work, had begun to behave like a place where work was carried out, which suggested then that the person at the keyboard was no longer simply writing, but increasingly supervising the work. Now, OpenAI has released its own response. It has taken the form of a new application called Codex for the Mac. It is described as a tool for writing code, though that description is not, well, entirely accurate. The machine performs the work and the human observes, intervening only when required. It is not a spectacular change, and honestly, it has arrived without much announcement. But it definitely alters the nature of the job all the same. Let me try to take you through the ambition it aspires towards. What will now happen is that you don't need to chat with one bot alone. Why would you, when there is a fleet available to manage? The new Codex app has allowed the users parallelism, which no longer warrants that the user has to twiddle his or her thumbs while waiting for the answer to the question asked, I guess, as it used to be earlier. Now, of course, with this, one can run multiple agents at once. It allows you to use the plan mode to draft the strategy. Also, one can use work trees to keep their very complicated changes isolated so they don't crash your main branch. One can build reusable skills, bundles of tools and workflows, and set automations to run while you sleep and wake up to a review queue. This design and framework announces that OpenAI is explicitly moving from AI helps you code to AI runs the task while you supervise. I'll say this, definitely for sure. The technology looks very impressive. It feels exciting. But a lot had to be cleaned out to make space for it. Let us, of course, start with the benchmarks, which are very forgettable. The release notes are very carefully written, which highlights that the real story can be found in what is no longer there. Wondering? I will elaborate. Just days before this launch, OpenAI made a set of decisions. February 13th, yes, which is worth noting. GPT 4.0 phased out. GPT 4.1 rolled into history. O4 Mini, it has been retired. Even the instant and thinking versions of GPT-5, done and dusted. These decisions were executed not because these models failed, no, that is not what it is, but because too many models create too much turbulence. Internally, OpenAI says most users had already moved to GPT 5.2. Usage of GPT 4.0 was down to a rounding error. So the personality people liked in 4.0 wasn't preserved, it was actually absorbed. And that's the unmistakable signal. Consolidation, my friends, has begun, making the model no longer the product, but instead giving the product distinction to the interface. And of course, how can we forget the drama which was unfolding, and it cannot be ignored, which is that OpenAI launched this on Mac OS first. Windows, on the other hand, has still got the coming soon tag still attached. This, of course, has made the internet furious. Half the timeline is yelling, elitist, implying that this is a San Francisco bubble strategy. Also claiming that real enterprise runs on Windows. And you know what? They are not wrong. But let me draw your attention to what's being said off the record. That this call which has been taken was to launch on Mac OS was not by design, but more so because of control. Because the moment an agent can run commands, move across your network and rewrite your files, you've crossed a line from being just a software to a system that acts. Mac OS is easier to constrain, not because Windows is being ignored, no, but because the first serious failure would be unrecoverable. Trust is the only thing holding all of this together. One agent misfires, one system gets erased, one story breaks, unfortunately, and suddenly this isn't a product launch anymore, it's become an incident. Why does any of this matter? Are you wondering about that? Well, because Anthropic is already closing in with Claude Code. Because the old chat window was never built for serious work in the first place. OpenAI definitely knows that. which is why they are not pricing this like a premium tool. They are actually seeding it. Codex is available on the free and go tiers for now. Paid users get higher limits, fewer constraints, more surface area, if you will, which means get people used to a different way of working, shift the default, make the old workflow feel very slow by comparison. Resultantly, one thread becomes many. Live typing becomes scheduled execution. One stops doing the work in real time. One starts orchestrating it on the other hand. The IDE is starting to look like a transitional object, something we used while waiting for better interfaces to arrive. The Mac versus Windows debate, I feel, is a sideshow. The model retirements are definitely housekeeping. The real change, though, is much simpler than all of that noise. You know what it is? You, yes, the used are no longer the person producing the input. Instead, you are deciding what gets produced, which means the job didn't disappear, it just graduated. And of course, all I can say is you need to go ahead and adjust accordingly. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Front Page on the AIM network. As we always say, like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM. Welcome to Front Page. $200 million, which is the amount of money Snowflake has just signed a multi-year check to OpenAI. If the headline is read in isolation, definitely it can sound a little deceptive. And here's why this signing isn't really indicative of a partnership, but more of an infrastructure absorption. For 12,600 enterprise customers, the gear has shifted. They now have first-party access to OpenAI models embedded directly into the Snowflake framework, running across AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. Which means, for a lot of organizations, AI does not need integration anymore, but it will be part of their stack already. Until yesterday, this was the reality of enterprise AI. Your data sat inside secure systems. Your AI, though, lived somewhere else. And to connect the two, you needed glue code, APIs, and a lot of security work, which forced you to constantly move the data out to the model instead of the model coming to the data. That gap made everything slow. It kept AI stuck in pilot mode, more experiments than infrastructure. Snowflake has effectively flipped that setup. The data stays where it is, the model moves to the data now. So with that, the agents can work directly on governed, audited datasets, and whatever else they produce, it inherits the same security by default. This is eliminating the need to ship data around anymore, consequently ensuring far less opportunities for things to leak along the way. Sridhar Ramaswamy, Snowflake CEO, said, AI has to run where trust already exists, end quote. And you know what? He is absolutely right. Chat interfaces are engaging. Yes, sure, it's true. But the real action is taking place at a much deeper level in the stack, which is the database layer, which is where the meaningful competition is actually starting to play out. And this is where it gets very, very interesting. You know why? Because most of the commentary is focused on the surface and missing out on what's really changing underneath. People think Snowflake picked a winner. You know what? Wrong. 2 months ago, Snowflake signed a $200 million deal with Anthropic. They still support Google Gemini and support Meta's Llama. Snowflake isn't betting on Sam Altman. No, they are instead wagering on model plurality. This example best explains it. Uber versus Lyft. Do you really care which car picks you up? No, right? You just want to get to the destination. The Snowflake VP of AI was pretty clear. Lock-in is the enemy, but choice is the real advantage. And ServiceNow is moving in the same direction. Large enterprises don't want to pledge allegiance to a single model anymore. They want the freedom to switch, combine, and deploy whatever works best for the job. So basically that means not one emperor, more like a whole army they can hire, rotate, and replace as needed. And of course, when we look at the timing, OpenAI is retiring the old guard. GPT 4.0, GPT 4.1, O4 Mini, as I had mentioned earlier, gone from ChatGPT. They are consolidating everything around GPT 5.2. Why? Well, because novelty is over. Differentiation is moving away from the brain and toward the hands. Codex is that interface play. Snowflake is the data play. OpenAI knows that consumer virality is very nice, but enterprise trust pays the rent. So what do you actually get? If you are a Snowflake customer, you get Cortex AI. You build agents that talk to your live revenue numbers. You query in complicated, unstructured PDFs in natural language, and you get 99.99% uptime. One gets disaster recovery, Canva speeding up, visual AI experimentation, Whoop, crunching health metrics faster. So as a result, this is unveiling production AI, which in turn is tied to return on investment and not just a cool demonstration for Twitter. But before, of course, we move forward, how about the elephant in the room? Databricks, yes, who has just raised $4 billion at a $134 billion valuation and are pushing their Agentbricks framework. What this has done is, well, bring a very clear message from the market saying whoever owns the platform owns the future. And I'm pretty sure you agree with us when we say that models are commodities and can very easily be swapped. User interfaces are very fashionable, but you know what? They go out of style. But data gravity, that is solid and permanent. In this new era, phase 1 was chatbots, phase 2 was co-pilots, phase 3 was agents. Snowflake plus OpenAI, I believe, is phase 4. Agents running directly on the metal of your business data. The user interface war is a distraction, but the database layer is decisive, because in this game, intelligence without trusted data is, trust me, just a hallucination. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by AIM Network. You know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM. Hello and welcome to Front Page. First came the mother of all deals with Europe, structured, slow, bureaucratic. Now, hello daddy, the father of all deals with America. And let me of course tell you, the energy is completely different. For months, Indian exporters were trapped in a trade horror film. The villain, a 50% tariff wall, plus a very nasty punitive duty on top because of the Russian oil. More than of course hurting margins, it flattened the sentiment. Competitiveness had vanished, and of course the panic was sky high. But tonight, we shall of course see the plot twist. Donald Trump calls Narendra Modi. Da, 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 da. Once the phone is put down, with it, the wall between the two countries comes down as well. The US confirms tariffs on Indian goods are slashed to 18%. That extra penalty for buying Russian oil has been rescinded. Overnight, Indian manufacturing transitions from just surviving to starting to breathe. Because 50% tariffs mean one is definitely dead in the water. But at about 18%, one starts to float and swim back to life. It is simple math. Lower landed cost means more orders. The markets know it, and Reuters confirms the almost instant shift in sentiment. But you know what? Hold on. We all know that there is no such thing as a free lunch, especially in geopolitics. But of course, there's always leverage. India does get tariff relief, for sure. That's surely the headline win. But the real question is, what did India give in return? Why I ask this is because if you read the US press release very carefully, the price tag is much higher than it first appears. Trump is presenting this as a very massive clean trade win. Very transactional, by the way. He's saying India will scale back on Russian oil, that it will pivot towards US energy, maybe even Venezuela crude. That said, then of course there's the headline number. A commitment to buy $500 billion worth of US goods, energy, tech, coal. That is $500 billion. That's the figure he wants everyone to remember and for everyone to resonate with. Modi, on the other hand, is being far more measured. The public messaging focuses on the 18%. It talks about partnership and never really actually confirms the $500 billion figure explicitly, which is, of course, I feel, very classic narrative warfare. One side is selling this as a straight-up trade deal, while the other is framing it as diplomatic breakthrough. And the space between those two very stories is actually where the real story breathes into life. You know what? Let's be honest. This is not so much about textiles, but more so about energy. The United States exerted the tariff pain to squeeze India on the one specific thing, which is Moscow. India used Russian crude to keep inflation down since 2022, and Washington hated this. But now, of course, that the deal is on the table, this is what it states. It states that the US drops the tax and India stops the purchase of Russian oil. But it is not that simple. If India cuts Russian crude, what does one do about supply? The United States want to step in and fill that gap. But oil from the United States is much costlier. The other option, which can bridge the gap, is Venezuela. But it presents a logical and political minefield, which brings us to the analysts who are asking the very obvious question, which is, what are the terms? What is the price? Because if the energy bill goes up, the tariff win gets erased. If we take a moment and observe the timing, it actually starts to feel very, very interesting. We feel this has not come to life in isolation. Just days before this call, we all remember, India had rolled out a very major policy update, a tax holiday, running all the way till 2047 for foreign companies, offering cloud services out of India data centers. What India effectively told the hyperscalers, establish your compute here, serve the world from here, and we won't tax you on any of it. A strong data center play, which means the first step is to stabilize the tech policy, which leads to attracting the big capital. And once that's cemented, the tariff relief starts to make more sense. Exports, energy, compute, they all start to line up, not as separate, but as parts of the same strategy. I believe building leverage does not come to light on the basis of just one deal. It requires stacking up advantages, one on top of the other. The EU deal, which is the mother, which was of course far more structural. Tariffs on cars slashed from 110% to 10%. Legal frameworks have a long runway. The US deal, dubbed the father, is a lot more tactical, a lot more high voltage, fast, loud, and it is tied up directly to the news cycle. EU is the fine print, but the US has a megaphone and India needs both. Because in the present world climate of 2026, having options represents power. Domestically though, if we were to understand where do we stand, the opposition leaders are calling it Trump Nirbharta. They're asking, why does India learn about the deal terms and conditions of all the places from Trump's social media field? Yeah, that's a very valid question. So if the final agreement looks one-sided, that criticism becomes very fair. And as we all of course know, if agriculture gets exposed, the consequences will be explosive. But having said that, the above, if India secured the 18% without crossing its own red lines, that to me, ladies and gentlemen, is a big victory. And here comes, of course, now the front page take. This is what we feel. Patience has paid off. The strategy was stabilize the trade routes, the data policy, and then get down to negotiations. And you know what? It has worked. But as of right now, this can only be classified as an announcement. The treaty is still awaited because in this kind of exchange between nations, announcements definitely impact markets. But what makes history is signing on the dotted line. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the AIM Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, Think AIM. We'll take a short little break, and when we are back, we'll be back with a very invigorating discussion only on Front Page. $1,700 GCCs. Yes, that's the present footprint in India of the global population of GCCs. $1.9 million people are gainfully employed in these global capability centers. $64.6 billion was generated in the fiscal year 2024. But the big target, that's 2030. 2,200 GCCs is what India wants to notch up to, employing more than 2.8 million people.
I wrote in my book that failures were in bold font for me and success was like default.
If you really want to control the narrative of life, you can do no wrong.
The people who focus on success and, sort of brush away failure, like a Virat Kohli is a great example.
Is doing a great job in bringing the GCC ecosystem together.
So you're adding a lot of value to the GCC ecosystem.
Oh, I had to take a beat and sit down to make sense of this amazing roller coaster ride that we've had at MachineCon 2025. We will catch you again at the next MachineCon. $1,700 GCCs. Yes, that's the present footprint in India of the global population of GCCs. $1.9 million people are gainfully employed in these global capability centers. $64.6 billion was generated in the fiscal year 2024. But the big target, that's 2030.
2,200 GCCs is what India wants to notch up to, employing more than 2.8 million people.
I wrote in my book that failures were in bold font for me and success was like default.
If you really want to control the narrative of life, you can do no wrong.
The people who focus on success and, sort of brush away failure, like a Virat Kohli is a great example.
Is doing a great job in bringing the GCC ecosystem together.
So you're adding a lot of value to the GCC ecosystem.
Oh, I had to take a beat and sit down to make sense of this amazing roller coaster ride that we've had at MachineCon 2025. We will catch you again at the next MachineCon. India's role in global manufacturing was fairly easy to describe for a very long time. The role was where a lot of the engineering happened, which was very important work, definitely yes, but mostly it was behind the scenes. What's changed over the last few years, though, is the scale and the nature of that very role. Today, manufacturing global capability centers make up close to a fifth of India's entire GCC ecosystem. That's roughly 250 centers spread across sectors like automotive, electronics, semiconductors, and industrial machinery. But you know what's even more telling is the pace. Between 2022 and 2024 alone, the number of new manufacturing GCCs set up in India almost doubled the historical average. And the work itself has transitioned. These centers are, apart from being well focused on support or cost efficiency, are increasingly responsible now for digital manufacturing platforms, AI-driven production systems, software-defined products, and in many cases, core intellectual property. In other words, India is helping build what the world manufactures. But more importantly, it's increasingly helping decide what gets built in the first place and how. And that very shift is what this latest report by AIM tries to capture. This is not a trend, mind you, but a structural change in how global manufacturing is now organized. And of course, joining me today is a wonderful research analyst of AIM Research who has been involved with the GCC ecosystem for more than a couple of years. He is very deeply entrenched. He understands the entire ecosystem. He's seen the growth and he can catch the nuances way better than any one of us can. And he's going to, of course, unveil what this report of his means. Big round of applause for Abhijit Adhikari. Welcome to Front Page, Abhijit. How are you doing?
Thank you for the introduction. I am doing great. So, as you mentioned about the ecosystem which is evolving, particular to the manufacturing GCCs. So, if we talk about from the earlier days, from 1985, when Texas Instruments, the first manufacturing GCCs and the first GCCs which entered as a GCC in India.
Right.
From that, now having almost 250 plus manufacturing GCCs.
Thank you so much for setting that context though, Abhijit. Yeah, because for our viewers, that's like a wow moment.
Yeah, and how this trend or growth has evolved. Like in the starting initial days from 90s to 2000, it used to move with a single digit number every year, like 9 or 8 GCCs, manufacturing specific, coming to India. But post 2020, though it was a pandemic time, a COVID time, there was no stop in manufacturing GCCs setting up their centers, R&D centers or innovation centers within India. And those scale up to a number of 34 to 40 GCCs, manufacturing GCCs every year.
Very impressive.
So this report will cover that particular overview, like how the growth, how the trend has been particular to manufacturing GCCs. Coming to next, where these manufacturing GCCs are coming from. What is the concentration from the geographical overview?
Sure.
So we covers almost 60% is coming from US,
Right.
followed by Europe and then Asia Pacific. And the other elements will cover like the concentration across the major Indian cities like Pune, Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Mumbai and Delhi NCR. Apart from that, it also covers what is the talent concentration.
I'll have to stop you for a second. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not going to give you all the details of the report because Abhijit has spent a lot of hard hours trying to put it all together. So we would of course discuss it. We would not gloss over it, but I would request you to download it because it is definitely extremely informative. I just thought that,
Sure.
It's something which is a lot of your hard work, which people should appreciate while reading
And it
it.
also covers a list of 250 plus GCCs across industry verticals.
And we are of course adding the link of the said report in the description. But one thing that has stood out for me, Abhijit, and I don't know if it is the same for you, which is that the tier 2, tier 3 push has been so encouraging. I mean, we have not seen that for decades. But now, over, let's say, the last couple of years, there is a very significant trust by state governments, by, the policymakers, to have a very strong push in the tier 2, tier 3.
So, I will talk from the manufacturing part, as like our theme starting of the discussion was about manufacturing GCCs. So, as you know, these manufacturing GCCs clusters, industrial clusters, are usually outside of the cities. And tier 2 cities and tier 3 cities have always these advantage in terms of engineering, supply chain, or the automation part of it. And the second part, which is these cities have a stable talent available plus lower attrition.
Yes.
Which is very good for long-term manufacturing projects.
And the fact that it's the environment augurs wonderfully well. They don't need to leave their homes and move away. So that emotional sort of connect is there. They'd rather work longer. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah. So now a question will arise that our manufacturing or any GCCs are going to relocate to tier 2 or tier 3 cities. My answer will be no. Why? Because these GCCs are going to work or are working in a hub and spoke model.
Sure.
So tier 1 city will be the center of the leadership, the heavy R&D work, and the orchestration or the architectural work. Spoke will be the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, which will cover shared services or operations things of the main GCC center.
Understood. Okay, so Abhijit, that brings me, which of course is extremely encouraging, as I had mentioned, that I mean, it definitely helps the overall ecosystem to flourish then, right? Which brings me to this. Chennai has forever been a champion, but if one looks at it from the fact that Pune has overtaken Chennai, which for India, in terms of the overall worldview, is fabulous for the overall ecosystem. But how do you probably interpret that?
So, see, I would say that in last couple of years or recent year, I think Chennai will always be the strongest city in terms of when we talk about manufacturing GCCs.
Because of the depth of talent.
Depth of talent plus the kind of sectors involved, GCC sectors involved, whether it is automobiles, whether it is heavy industrial engineering, or whether it is
Semiconductors, correct.
Coming to Pune in the recent years and some of the policy initiatives by the Maharashtra government has taken the growth momentum of attracting new GCCs, manufacturing GCCs, or expansion of the earlier GCCs.
Sure.
So it is like if we are comparing it, so the comparison would be wrong. It's just the part of the growth momentum that Pune has leveraged out of that. Plus, Pune also have that kind of talent available right now, which is very particular to manufacturing GCCs in terms of software product development or engineering focused work.
Right.
So that's why like Pune somewhere is just taking the leverage of
that momentum.
That momentum.
Which is a good thing. Ease of doing business was mentioned by the finance minister during the budget speech. How do you feel that that as overall philosophy, policy moving forward will impact?
So see, I would say it is a good initiatives that has been taken. Previously, I think in many of the GCC, state-wise GCC policy, there has been these sort of implementation of ease of doing business. But if it is coming from center, then it is a very positive, I would say, action that have been taken for the GCCs or for any foreign organization. Coming to back to our topic of manufacturing GCCs, it is very important for manufacturing GCCs in terms of compliance and legal issues.
Okay.
Because manufacturing GCCs has to go a lot of things in terms of import, export.
Absolutely.
Testing and operational things. And by initiating a term or plan which will impact in ease of doing business, setting up or expansion of the earlier GCCs will be at a very exponential way.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess I completely agree with you on that one, Abhijit. For example, somebody who is going to pour in millions and billions of dollars, you need policy stability. You need the fact that you don't need years and years for permissions and things like that to carry on, while the clock is constantly ticking because the interest rates would be through the roof.
Yes.
Right? So, with this ease of doing business, you feel that worldwide this will send out a signal to a lot of the companies
yes, a lot.
To say, all right, wait a minute, man, let's go towards India.
See, why it will impact, because right now, if let's say, if there is an organization which set up a manufacturing GCC center in India just 2 years ago, and if they see like these sort of mandates are coming when the government is introducing ease of doing business, it creates an impact on the global headquarters to move heavy responsibility on the GCC center which are residing in India.
Yeah, well put. Yeah, makes sense.
And this was also impact for the GCC to not rely on the tier 1 city and to look for tier 2 and tier 3 city talents as well.
Yeah.
So this would change the basic GCC mandate for all sort of sectors which are opening their GCC center here in India.
So it's an overall boost.
Yeah.
Tell me this, Abhijit, what do you feel as far as our progress has been? I think it's been fascinating from the fact that we, like you mentioned, it was 90s, and then, you know, today we are in a position where we are taking critical decisions right here in India on a global level. We are no longer considered that very derogatory term of a back office. Well, that seems to be, you know, fading away from everyone's memory. With all of these things taking place, how do you see us standing globally with, let's say, if I were to talk about China, if I were to talk about the United States, how would you see us standing on those platforms now, and with all of these changes coming in, and of course your report as well, which is going to open up whole new vistas of thought 5 years down the line?
See, already there is more than 50% of world GCCs are here in India. And we are almost targeting or predicting, would be the accurate word, around more than 2,000 GCCs by 2030.
And almost looking at 9.9 million people in terms of employment.
Yeah, employment.
If I got the figure right, yeah.
So I think the major role will be how the state and central government are taking up the policy and how the policies are actually working on the ground.
Right.
So if these are going to be on the papers, or these are going to be really happening and doing the ease of business for the GCCs.
You still sound a little skeptical about it though.
Yeah.
Why is that?
So, see, I have interacted with most of the GCC leaders.
Okay.
And the same question I have asked them, ki how these new state policies or the central policies have helped you actually. So, I won't going to say like, but a percentage of those leaders have said these are just on the papers.
Okay. Okay. So there is, you've burnt the fingers in the past, so that means you're being just a very, very circumspect, you're being skeptical.
Yeah.
But we are hoping that with all of the investments which are being pledged, do you think that might help?
Yeah, I think the Pune to Bangalore to Bhubaneswar, the corridor is being made with almost an investment of 5,000 crores.
Correct.
So I think that is going to impact a lot of like attraction towards companies coming and opening their centers here in India, whether it's R&D or innovation. So I think right now, I will say, as I like previously I mentioned, that what was on paper should be come on to the ground.
Sure.
I think right now it has started coming on the ground level, and we are seeing those sort of changes which will enhance like the position of India to be like a manufacturing hub in next 10 to 15 years.
So if you were to sum it up for all of us, Abhijit, what's your front page take in a couple of lines? What does the road look like?
So I would say that there is enough more than expected talent in India. Talent is growing. There is not a position where the talent was available to tier 1 cities only. Now it's the landscape is evolving to tier 2, tier 3 and even tier 4 cities. And what GCCs look from a perspective is the talent.
Sure.
So I would say
we are waiting.
So
that we would like for you to hit the nail on the head by saying that the talent is what the beating heart of this entire ecosystem is.
Yes.
And that is in place.
Yes.
With the policies coming in, I believe that can make sure that it's a big boost and it encourages people to come in and make the big investments in India. Fair enough. Abhijit, ladies and gentlemen, Adhikari, please download the report. It is a very elaborate one, as Abhijit was mentioning right at the top. We of course have given you the link in the description. So yes, that is for your perusal. But after everything what Abhijit and I discussed, I believe I would like to end on this note. It is encouraging. There is a huge push as far as policy is concerned. But I still believe maybe we need to be cautiously hopeful and ensure that whatever is being said is actually being implemented. It is, I guess, about walking the talk. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page on the AIM network. And as we say always, like, share, subscribe. Think AI, think GCC, think AIM.